Now we're going to turn our attention towards Ballybofey, and of course, Finn Harps need no introduction to any fan of the league. But one person who joined Ollie's army in the middle of last season, just after COVID, was Stephen Folan, who came home from Australia to play with Finn Harps and keep them up, or to help keep them up. Is a team effort, definitely. In the last half of the season, yes, last season, it was Stephen Folan. He joins us now. Stephen, you're very welcome to the programme.
How's it going, guys?
Well, I'm great. How's all with you? Are you in Ballybofey? Are you at home? Where's home for you?
I'm actually at home here in Galway, so yeah, no Ballybofey for me this weekend, but I'll be up there this week, most
It's a hell of
definitely.
a commute.
Yeah, it is, but you get used to it, and to be fair to the club, they really look after you in terms of like putting you up. So I might only have to do the commute once a week, and I might stay up there and then come down after the game at the weekend. So yeah, no, it's ideal for me and my situation that I'm in at the minute.
Let's talk a bit about that situation, because you came home from Australia last year. COVID hit. I suppose the league was cancelled. You were in a bit of limbo, and Finn Harps gave you an opportunity to kind of come back and play in the league. Was it a tough decision to make?
No, Jesus, it wasn't, because obviously the 2 years previous to that at Dundalk, like I didn't really kick a ball, and I moved to Australia thinking, like an opportunity here for me to go play in another league and probably under different styles of play, because obviously there's a lot of Eastern European managers over there, and my manager at the time, and he's still the manager there, was an Argentinian who was at Atletico Madrid for 10 years in the B team. So that was kind of like the draw of that league. It was kind of, I knew you would get like a kind of European football feel to it, and just wanted to go and experience that. And I think my attitude kind of was I played in the league for so long, obviously wasn't good enough to go back to England. So the opportunity to go probably elsewhere, appealed to me, and especially after not playing for 2 years at Dundalk, the opportunity to go play football in another country was a no-brainer, and as well from a lifestyle thing and a job opportunity, even for my wife, it was just something that we felt like we couldn't turn down, and it didn't work out the way we thought it was going to work out, but it was still a fantastic experience. And then obviously when I was coming home and Ollie got wind, he rang me, and yeah, he just agreed a deal pretty much there and then. There was no back and forth. Made me an offer and drove down. I think they were playing one of the Northern Irish teams, and basically they were playing Belfast, and then he drove down to Galway and just got the deal done there and then, and that was it. And Joe haven't looked back since.
Yeah, Stephen, just want to touch on Ollie there. You mentioned him. He's obviously kind of well known as probably the face of Finn Harps across the league, really. I only actually know him as an opposition manager, so I only see the kind of shouting and screaming or the animation on the sideline. But what's he actually like? What's he like personally? What's he like behind the scenes?
Polar opposite. Then on a match day or against an opposition, like I always thought Ollie, was like, shouting and yada yada, but complete opposite in training. Like one of the best, if not the best, man manager I've ever played under. Very positive towards the group, and I know he interviews. Like he has some classic one-liners and stuff and whatnot, but he is actually really, really positive. And on the training field, he gets his ideas across quickly. He's got like a mixture of different styles of management. Like he puts things out to the group. He puts his foot down. He's every player needs something different, and I think he noticed that and he understands it, and he treats everyone accordingly.
In terms of, I suppose, the locations of the clubs you've been at, we mentioned Melbourne, of course, that's the Great Ocean Road. Here in Ireland, in Cork, Limerick, Galway, Sligo, now Finn Harps. A bit of a fascination with the Wild Atlantic Way, perhaps. Is it something about coastal regions? Are you still for at heart? What's the situation?
I honestly don't know. I think it's just happened the way it's happened. Obviously, when I came back from England in end of 2012, going into the start of 2013, I was up at Rovers for a week, and Trevor Crowley was the manager there, and we were in Carton House, and I really, really enjoyed it. And obviously when I went away at 15, and that, like, you don't see the League of Ireland, you don't hear about it, it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind, and you don't really understand the standard of how good it actually is, and like when I was at Newcastle, I had a chance to go to Derry on loan under Decky Devine, I think in 2011, 2012. And obviously I turned it down at the time because I was trying to go somewhere else in England. But in hindsight, do you know what I mean? That could have been, like, I could have had a completely different career if I had taken that opportunity at a younger age, because the way I look at it is I wasted 2 years basically just playing reserve team football when I could have went somewhere and played men's football, and I could have been 2 years further down the road with my development, both physically and mentally, and probably something that I look back at and be like, if I approached things differently when I was that age and maybe had a different mindset, things probably would have worked out a little bit different for me along the way. But I look at boys who were my age, like Jeff Hendricks, main example. Like, by the time I was 21, I'd say he had maybe 150 games played, close to that anyways, and I hadn't played one. So I always say, even to like any of the young lads that do be in and around teams, of like, get yourself out on loan and go and play men's football. Doesn't matter where it is. It's just about getting the minutes under your belt, because ultimately that's where you're going to learn. When people have points on the board and playing for mortgages and all these kind of things, and that's when the realities of like football really hit in and hit home. And I never really understood that when I first came home. Like, say, when I was playing with like your Bradleys, your Gambles, and Paddy Purcell, and all these older players, like, I didn't understand the mortgages and all that situation, and you probably just, it's just a game of football, but it's not. Like, it's more than that. And I think nowadays, some kids, especially in the clubs I've been at, are just happy to probably be at a top club, and just being at a top club and been around the top club, rather than going out making a name for themselves and going playing games.
Who's excited you of the youngsters coming up around the Ballybofey direction at the moment? What players coming in do you think maybe could break in and maybe make that name for themselves in Finn Harps this season?
Yeah, it's a bit of a tough one, really, because we've got like quite an older team compared to a lot of teams in the League of Ireland. If you look like across the back line, you have me, Webster, McElhenney, they're all 29, 30, 31. McGinley, another, I think he's 30, 31. So we've got quite an older team, but there is a couple of young lads, and I don't think it'd really be fair for me to single any one of them out just yet, because they're still learning their way, and they're still, trying to apply themselves in training. So I wouldn't want to just single anyone out, but there is a good crop of youngsters coming through. And I don't know if you'd followed the Finn Harps social medias recently. There's a lot of young lads who've signed deals at the club, and there's a lot that have got a lot of potential. So yeah, no, so it's definitely interesting times for Finn Harps, especially with some of the youngers coming through.
Stephen, you mentioned actually a good mate of mine there, Dave Webster, played with him at Bray for a long, long time. And obviously Shane McElhaney and yourself. Do you think that's pretty much the basis of your strength as a team, like that central defensive partnerships, the back three, so to speak, and really like that's where you're hoping to get most of your successes, from the solidity of that back three?
Yeah, well, like, see, the thing is, as well, we've got a young defender called Kosver Siddiqui. He's only about 21, 22. He's an absolute specimen. Like, he's an animal of a young lad. He's got tons and tons of ability, physically as well. He's an athlete. So, like, we've been quite lucky that even though he's young, when I came into the team anyways last year, I could see a lot of myself in him when I first came back to Ireland, and I was just trying to talk to him and help him a little bit along the way. And by the end of the season, last 3 or 4 games, he probably was one of our best players. Not saying that my advice helped him, but I think he's seen a different outlook on things, and he's come back in as well on board again this year, and we're delighted to have him as well. So, like, Ollie has a bit of a headache, I suppose, because
Yeah.
you've got us three and Costs, and what you can put whatever combination together really, and so he definitely has a headache first game of the season, but like we'd be looking obviously to be solid at the back and not give up any chances. But I'd like to think if you look at the Finn Harps team on paper, it's not of the Finn Harps team that you would have seen 4, 5, 6 years ago. There's a lot of players that have been at bigger clubs that mightn't have had the bigger impact at the bigger clubs, but have come together, and hopefully we can create a strong group and hopefully push on and bring the club forward, because as I was saying earlier before the show, like, it's a fantastic club and they genuinely look after their players. So, I know we finished, it was their highest finished in a while last year, but I suppose I would say that there was a couple of games in there that we should have won and we kind of let it slip, and if we had won them games, we would have finished closer to Europe than what teams probably thought we would have,
Yeah.
In terms of that team going forward, obviously there's a lot of experience through it, the likes of Tony McNamee, his brother Barry McNamee, Ryan Connolly, all in there as well. It is an older team, and I suppose up to now the predictions have always been aiming for that playoff spot. There's a kind of joke that Ollie take the playoff at the start of the season.
Yeah.
Now that you actually survived there without the playoff last year, has I suppose the predictions or the expectations risen a little bit within the club? The addition of a couple of extra more experienced players, has it kind of lifted that to maybe aiming for that 5th or 6th or 7th spot rather than a 9th spot?
Well, like, I suppose the history of the last couple of years, as you were saying, if you're given the playoff spot to Ollie at the start of the season, would he take it? He would. And if you get offered him now again, would he take it? He would. But I suppose we have to try and win games and change the perception of Finn Harps and Ballybofey, and try and get people on board that, like, we're not just in the league just to make up the numbers or just finish in the playoff and be happy with that. Like, we have to want more, both as a team and as a club. Like, so hopefully this season now we can get everything in order and try and push up the table. But look, I'm realistic, and I suppose everyone else is realistic. Like, our budget's nowhere near other teams, I'm sure, that are in and around us. So I suppose it is a tough one from that regard, but I suppose you don't go into any season thinking, we might get relegated or we might just stay up. Like, you have to have a little bit more belief and confidence, and I think you can tell when you look around the dressing room and you see what players are beside you. You're in a little bit of a chance. So I suppose if we can start well and stick to what we believe in and try and get the points on the board, I'd say we'll be okay.
It's kind of mentioned all around the league. The trip to Ballybofey is kind of maybe treacherous, or certain, like, around certain clubs, people would look at that as a difficult game. Do you, like, within the squad, do you play on that a little bit, kind of say, we're going to make this really difficult, we're going to make this a fortress, we're going to make sure everyone coming here is having a really, really tough time and a really tough game? Is that kind of something that you talk about, or is it just, you're just trying to win your home games?
I think so. I think it's just a natural thing. As I said, like, the clubs I would have played with in the past, and whenever we played at Finn Harps, and you'd go up and you have the tiny dressing rooms and blah. But me personally, or anything like that, I just take it every game as it comes, and you need to build your wins, especially at home. Like, you need to try and make it a fortress and not be dropping points at home. But I actually probably felt we were probably better, especially in the back end of the season. We were probably better away from home. So it can work both ways, really. Like, and I suppose it's a bit of a shame that there's no fans at the minute. I think that's a big one, really. I think if teams were coming to Ballybofey when there's fans there as well, and the weather's bad and the pitch is bad, like, it's probably a little bit better for us. But in saying that as well, I think also it can be a hindrance to us with the pitch, because we've got a lot of good footballers there now at the club, and it's not a coincidence that when we've been playing good football and winning games, they've been away from home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it can work both ways, but I understand the mentality from being on the other side with opposing teams of what you think going to Finn Harps. But when I got there and realised like how good the people are and everything, and how
Yeah.
accommodating they are, it's like couldn't be further from the truth. Like,
You talk about the good weather, and I suppose that's a polar opposite from where you came from in terms of Melbourne. What was that like? Because you have a very unique experience in this country last year of actually traveling, but obviously
oh yeah.
as a work. But talk about that whole situation, because I know there was rumors of going to the showground with Sligo Rovers. That didn't seem to materialize, and then all of a sudden you were just announced as a Harps player. What was, I suppose, involved in all of that from your point of view?
Yeah, I basically had like, unfortunately, like my wife, like she's like, I'm very selfish, like in terms of football and decision making, and it's only simply because like you don't have a long career, and she basically had no choice in us going to Melbourne. Like we literally got married on the 28th of December, and then 4 days later I was gone, and she was still here, and then she followed me down like a month later, and like it's been really hard on her because she's had to like up and leave and switch careers and do new jobs. She had the job for a couple of weeks, then she lost it because of the first lockdown in Melbourne. Then she got a new job, and then she only had it a day. And then I have to tell her, right, look, the season's not happening. I'm not sitting there for 6 months waiting for another season to start, or it could be longer. I go, I have a couple of options to go back home. Like, let's just go home, play football again, and then see what happens. So yeah, like I actually owe a lot to my wife because she's very accommodating to for me. Whereas a lot of people would be kind of like, well, no, like we're going to stay in Melbourne because one, the weather, blah blah blah, you know, lifestyle. Even during the lockdown there, even though we were away from everyone, it was probably a little bit easier because um, obviously the weather been one, like just where we were living and everything. It was amazing, such a beautiful place. Um, so yeah, like it's traveling during the pandemic was so strange. Like getting on the flights and having to wear like the masks, the visors. You had to wear like visors the whole way um from Melbourne to Dublin. Um, it was just so strange. And then you get to Dublin and you hadn't done the where you're going to be living for the next 2 weeks quarantine or whatever, and so no one rang you, no one checked up on you. It was just the biggest shambles ever. Like,
Just on the Australia experience, Stephen, did you see anything kind of from their league? Like, would they be far ahead of us in terms of infrastructure, training facilities, that kind of thing? Like,
well, like just the club I played at, South Melbourne, their stadium, it was basically in an athletics track, 12,000 seater, unbelievable pitch, change rooms, kind of like what Dundalk have in their training ground change rooms, like the
yeah,
Man City ones, the individual cubbies. Yeah, no, they were really professional. And like I was kind of blown away when I first came over there because um, obviously speaking to other players who have played in the league or whatever, and they were telling me that it was a bit of a pub league and blah blah blah, but I couldn't get over the standard, to be honest. I was kind of blown away that I was thinking, right, they're going to be fit, but technically they're not going to be great. But there was the polar opposite. They're obviously very fit and they were very, very good technically because
yeah,
you've got a lot of like Croatian influences and Bosnian, like, so a lot of technically gifted coaches that are passing on to the younger players. And there was a couple of players that played in my team that would get into majority of League of Ireland teams, probably bar Dundalk and Shamrock Rovers and maybe Bows at the minute. But it would have been the only way I could sum it up if you were to take the top two out of the league and all the other teams in the league that I played in, like they could equally hold their own. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, in terms of, I suppose, where you go from here, obviously this season with Ollie, in Ballybofey, what's the bigger picture? Obviously, you mentioned 29, 30 years of age. Have you thought past retirement, or have you got another few years in the legs yet?
No, I'm only 29 yet. I haven't thought about that. I started a college course in GTI last September. It's only a year course, but it was just more so just to get myself back into education and trying to think about what I want to do, because obviously it's not long now, really. Like 29, it comes around quick, and obviously I'd like to play for as long as I'm fit and healthy, and as long as someone has me. But I'm realistic enough to know that when I can't perform to how I would like to perform, I know I'd pack it in before someone can tell me to pack it in, you know.
Obviously, this weekend out in action in Athlone Town Stadium. You talk about good facilities in Melbourne. Athlone on the pitch, the stadium, it's a nice little ground. Hopefully we'll see a few more bodies in it next week. I know we had Adrian Carby on the show last week. The game, a 3-1 victory for yourselves. Are you happy with the performance? Happy with how the squad is shaping up for the season?
Yeah, no, it was definitely a positive performance, and we got through it, and there was no injuries, and our goals that we got came from good passages of play and what we were basically working on the training ground. So it's good to see the stuff that we're working on the training ground come to fruition. And obviously it's disappointing to concede the goal the way we did, but look, it was good just to get the win, and I suppose just for lads' heads and a bit of confidence for them going into our next game against Cork on Saturday, which is another good game for us. I know Colin has them playing decent football and had a good win themselves at the weekend. So, no, it was good to get the minutes under the legs for boys. And as I said, like, Ollie's got a headache now picking his 11 coming up to the start of the season.
Well, I'm sure Stephen Folan's name will be somewhere in and around that starting 11 come the start of the season. The very best of luck to you for the year ahead. I'm sure we wouldn't want to disappoint Ollie and aim higher than 9th. It'd be disappointed he missed out on his playoff party at the end of the season, but I'm sure the rest of the squad would be quite happy to take 7th or 8th or even further.
We'll take 9th if we get it.
Listen, Stephen, thanks for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And best of luck for the year.
Cheers.
Cheers,
Thanks, man, guys.
Thanks.
Cheers.